Hi, today we're going to be talking about well-being and the self-care of the leader. This is something that is really critically important to your role as a leader. What often happens is that we don't actually look after ourselves particularly well because we're so focused on looking after everybody else, meeting KPIs, doing all the things that we often think a leader should have to do. But I would suggest that probably one of the most important things we need to do as a leader is to look after ourselves. And the reason for this is that our team is constantly looking to us to determine whether or not they're safe, to determine whether or not things are okay. And so when we're not coping very well, when we're tired and run down, when we're working really long hours and doing a lot of work on behalf of the team because we're either protecting them from stress or something that's difficult or whatever, and when we're not looking after ourselves, the team looks at the leader and goes, wow, this is really stressful here. And so they take that on. They call it the leadership laser. The team is just constantly measuring how the team is going based on how the leader is going. It's important to be very aware of the optics of your behaviours on the team. It is critically important. So we're going to talk today about what you can do to better look after yourself and to be really mindful of how your behaviours might be impacting on others. So the reality is that if you're okay, the team's going to be much more okay. If you're overwhelmed and stressed out and struggling, then the team's going to pick up that energy and that's going to have an impact on them as well. So we need to be really mindful of that. Now, this does not mean that you need to be perfect, not by any stretch of the imagination. Nobody is perfect, and we do get really stressed. It's just about an opportunity to own your stuff. So what I mean by that is I think it's often good as a sort of a risk management tool to, in a team meeting, when we're talking about how we're all traveling and going, is to own, okay, I'm feeling really stressed at the moment. But you can also preempt it by having a meeting with your team and saying, look, sometimes I'm going to get stressed. And when I get stressed, this is what it might look like. So that the team don't get freaked out when one day suddenly the usual bubbly you that you are suddenly is very, very grumpy or snappy or withdrawn or whatever that might look like for you. If you can give the team the heads up about, look, there are going to be days when I get really stressed and this is what it might look like, then when they see it, they go, all right, that person's stressed today, that's okay, we'll give them some space. So long as you don't remain in that state and it's just a short-term thing, teams can accommodate that. What they get uncomfortable about is when you don't own it and you're pretending that everything's okay, and in fact, it's not okay for you. But you're human, and so you're allowed to not cope some of the time, but give them the heads up so that they know not to be worried by that that's what that is for you. There's this other lovely thing that I've just come across recently, which is a thing called clearings. And so you can use this at the beginning of a meeting, and it can be really valuable for your team to just sort of own things that are going on in people's worlds so that we understand that they might be distracted by something. So you can do this at the beginning of a meeting or a team box. Sorry, Tom, I'm going to go back to clearings. What's it called? Toolbox is what I was trying to say. Okay. There's this other tactic or tool that you can use that I've just recently come across called clearings. And what it is that at the beginning of a meeting or a toolbox meeting or something like that, when you're going around the group checking in, because I always believe it's a good idea to just check in with people and sort of see them as people before we get on to the tasks. So part of that process can be this thing called clearing. And what it is you clear any distractions that people might have. So we all know that people have lives outside of work that can have an impact on our mood or may create a distraction in our world, not necessarily full time, but it's part of the time. And so what this clearings is you can say to the group, does anyone have any clearings? You have to explain it to them. And then anybody who has something that might be distracting them in that meeting or during the day can say, I've got a bit of a headache. And so if I look just sort of like my face looks like I'm in pain, I am, I've got a headache. Hopefully it'll go away. I've taken some Panadol, should be right. Or somebody might put up their hand and say, look, my child's sick today, they're with mum, but if things get worse, I might need to take them to the doctor. And if you've got other things going on in your world, I'm working on a really difficult project at the moment. I'm working longer hours than usual this week. It won't be going on beyond this week because we'll get that piece of work in on Friday. But I just thought you should know that that's why I'm working late this week. Just putting it out there, just owning it rather than making it something that we have to guess. And then people make assumptions and all those things. So I love the idea of clearings where we just get an opportunity to explain what might be distracting us today. And it's really valuable as a leader that if you do this, you might find that there's somebody who has more distractions than somebody else. And then you can tap into that person and go, is everything okay? Because they might need a higher level of support. So I think that clearings is a lovely way of people owning their stress, of you being able to own whatever might be going on for you as well. We humanize people, we see them as people, we're not just workers. And that is a lovely way to proceed. I don't know, maybe that time, but there you go. Okay, just cut out that gap and add this. So there are 3 reasons why looking after yourself is really useful and valuable. The first is that if you look after yourself, you will be demonstrating and modeling behaviours that you want the rest of the team to do as well. Because if we're all fit and healthy and sleeping well and not working late and taking breaks and doing all of those things, if we model those behaviours, then that has to be good for you and it has to be good for the team. I'm going to stop there, Tom. Just hang on a second. So there are 3 really good reasons for looking after yourself. And the first one is that if you model really good behaviour, then there's going to be flow-on effects to the rest of the team and they're going to feel better about themselves. And so that's really good. So you model good behaviour and they get less stressed. The second one is, it is very likely that if the team see you as less stressed, they will feel less stressed. Their well-being will improve. They will feel that they are more satisfied at work, their stress levels go down, and then they become more productive. And so you create a happier, healthier workplace because you're okay, because you're modeling that behavior that you would like the whole team to do. And you're not stressed out all the time because you're trying to take on all the work of the team and the responsibility of the team. And finally, the third one is that you feel better in yourself. And it is so much easier and more fun to be a leader when you're not stressed. When we are stressed, we're not our best selves, and our responses to situations, difficult situations, can sometimes reflect that we're not our best selves and become much more difficult than they might possibly need to be. But if we do look after ourselves, then we tend to turn up and able to, oh, fuck, Kate, stop. Ugh. So there are 3 really good reasons why you should do what you can to better look after yourself. And the first one is that when you model good behaviour, when you're looking after yourself and you're doing things to reduce your own stress levels, that's going to have a flow-on effect to the team. And so generally there'll be greater happiness. 2, if the team is feeling less stressed because you're modeling that you are taking care of yourself and reducing stress levels. Their stress levels come down, their productivity is likely to go up, their level of satisfaction is more likely to go up, their overall well-being will go up, because this is the norm of this team, of this group. And you're just generally all going to enjoy doing what you do more, and you'll get more engagement and more buy-in because of this feeling of we're on top of things. We can manage difficult situations. And finally, the third thing about self-care that is good is that when we look after ourselves, the job of leadership becomes easier. It becomes so much easier to deal with difficult situations when we are not overly stressed, tired, and run down. We all know we are not our best selves when we are tired and run down or overwhelmed. And if we can do anything we can to reduce that, and by doing self-care actions like getting enough sleep, eating well, getting some exercise, those type of things, then that is going to dramatically assist us in enjoying our work, which again will have a flow-on effect to the team. At the end of the day, we want to be a positive impact on our teams. We don't want to be a distraction. We want to be a caring leader who looks after ourselves and looks after the people that work with us in our team, because the role of the leader is to empower and engage the team to do the work that's necessary to meet the goals of the organisation. The role of the leader is not to do all of the work. The role of the leader is to nurture and care for the people in that team, in that organisation, to assist them to do the work to meet the goals. That's the role of the leader. So I want to go back and revisit some elements of DISC. I'm not going to go through it all again in great detail. We've done that previously in another segment around DISC, but I wanted to just go back and remind ourselves of some of the things that can occur when we are stressed. DISC is really helpful in helping us understand that the behaviours is just reflecting a stress level and is not the person. We need to distinguish the person from the behaviour. We sometimes see behaviours because a person is stressed. It doesn't make the person good, bad, or indifferent. It just gives us some really valuable information about what we are looking at when a person is stressed. So if we remember dominant, influencer, security, and compliance. And what we know about these different styles is that dominant people tend to be controlling because their driver is winning or success. So we often see controlling behavior. They do many other things. They do many things, but one of their significant behaviors that we see is that they like to control an outcome because they like to win. What we know is that they fear loss of control. When they get very stressed, as a result of that fear of losing control, they can become more controlling. So we would have all seen that behavior, and we would become aware of that in our own selves at times, particularly if we are a high D in our personality style, that when we get very stressed, we may become more controlling. And that might look like using our body or our language to control the situations. And so we just need to be mindful of that. It can sometimes look like my way or the highway, like you will do what you're told, that type of thing. So we just need to be aware of that. As a leader, as an influencer, the behaviors that we can see is they tend to be social, very sociable and optimistic, and they're driven by experience. I can spell. So they're wanting to have a good experience. They want other people to have a good experience. They very much influence organizations and groups around the experience. When they get stressed, their fear is, oh my God, Tom, I can't, I'm going to start that again. So I want to just revisit DISC very quickly. I'm not going to go through it all. We've discussed that more in another segment, but I wanted to just revisit this because it's a great reminder of the way in which our different behaviours may surface when we're very stressed. What we know about dominant people is that as part of their behavioural style, they do like to control an outcome because they are driven by winning. They want to be successful and win. So what can happen is that when they get stressed, and that stress can usually come around because of a loss of control. And that loss of control could be a whole range of different things. It could be that another leader has stepped in and is doing the work, that is headbutting between different people, you've lost funding, whatever it might look like, but there's a loss of control. When a dominant person feels a loss of control, they can become more controlling. So that increases. So that behavior of wanting to control things can increase, and what that can look like is my way or the highway, or standing up and sort of being very firm, and this is where we're going. So just be mindful of your behavior if you are a high D, of when you get very stressed, what are your team seeing? Now, influencers are very sociable beings. They like to use relationships to drive decision making and get things done, and they very much are calling on experience, I can't spell, to achieve those outcomes. So the driver for the high I, the influencer, is experience. They want other people to have a good experience, and they want to have a good experience. So that's really valuable information to know. Now, what happens is when they get scared because they fear social rejection. So if they are fearing social rejection, and that might look like my ideas are not successful, this is not going to be a good experience, somebody's not talking to me, a whole range of different things that can come into that bucket. You don't like me, so the idea I put forward is not what you want, and now I think you don't like me. A whole heap of stuff. What you can see when a high I gets very stressed and has these fears of social rejection is that they can become sarcastic, and they can become whiny and needy. And so again, this is really important, that if you're a leader and you get very stressed and you feel like the team doesn't like you, or that the work that you're doing is not accepted and people are having a bad experience, then this might be some of the behaviors that you default to, that you might become sarcastic, or you might become needy, and you might draw attention to yourself. That might not be okay in that moment. So just be really mindful of that. Now, security people, they like safety. They like to feel safe. They like to know what's going on. They're very much about relationships and close relationships, and they like the status quo. They don't like sudden change. So, and they're the nurturers. No, come back. They're the nurturers. Oh, don't do that. The nurturers of the group. They very much look after people, because in looking after people, we create safe environments and we make sure that everything's okay. They're driven by wanting to feel safe, and they will often basically do anything not to rock the boat to achieve that. They don't like sudden change. And so if they get very stressed because there is sudden change or somebody's expecting them to do something or make a decision quickly that they don't feel comfortable with, that type of thing, or they get overwhelmed, what they can do is withdraw. And as a leader, when a leader withdraws and they go into themselves and they become less communicative, they're not giving facial feedback, they might sometimes even leave the building. They might go and suddenly work from home for a period of time or whatever as a leader. If the team feels that there's a disconnect there, that can be incredibly stressful to a team. It's like, can't talk to so-and-so because they're not giving you much today. So just be mindful of that if you are a high S, what are the behaviors that you call upon when you get really stressed, and what is your team seeing? And finally, on the compliance people, these people fear criticism. They are driven by a fear of failure because they like to be accurate. And so what we can see is that when a high C is then very, very stressed because they feel that they've been criticized, that things have not gone the way they've liked them to go, they don't have enough time to be accurate and get things right, all of the different things, then what we can see is that they become critical of others. So they can criticize others. So they deflect their discomfort onto others and they criticize them. Now, what we're seeing here are just behaviors that reflect our stress levels. But what's important for you as leaders is that you need to be acutely aware of what you do when you're stressed and what the team sees, because all of these behaviors down the bottom here of controlling, sarcastic, withdrawing, or being highly critical can be very difficult for a team to manage. And when we're our best selves, that's not an issue. When we're not at our best selves, this can become an issue, particularly if this happens regularly, if this is something that the teams are seeing on a regular basis. What are the behaviors? The occasional behavior that is more extreme in this bottom line, they can cope with that, particularly if you've given the heads up that this is what it might look like when I get stressed. But if this is sort of a long-term response to overwhelm and exhaustion and the like, then this can start to have an impact on the well-being of your team. This is the final bit, Tom. So what does self-care look like? We all know lots of things about self-care. We've been told them all the time. We often go, yeah, we should do that. We know we should do that. But we get overwhelmed with work, with responsibility, with meeting KPIs, with all the things that go with being a leader. And some of those things fall away and we don't do them. But some really important things that you can do to look after yourself is to make sure you go to bed at a reasonable time so you get some sleep. Sleep is really important. In fact, they would say that might be one of the most important things you can do to look after yourself. So if you're struggling to get to sleep, we know people that can help you, but research it, do all the things that you need to do to get sleep, because it is incredibly important in your overall well-being and will have a major impact on how you relate to your team. The next one, which is really obvious again, but we often let this go, is eating well. So when we're really tired, when we're running from job to job, when we don't think we have enough time, we don't prepare food, we might eat poorly or not eat at all. There are all of those things, but what we fuel our body with reflects on how we manage a whole lot of stress. So taking care of yourself and eating well is really important. Exercise doesn't have to be going to a gym. It could look like going for a walk, but there is no doubt that exercise is incredibly important for helping people manage their mental health. exercise is the #1 non-medical intervention that doctors and specialists recommend for helping people manage their mental health. It will depend on your season of life, of all of the other responsibilities you may have, because if you're a parent with young children, or if you're dealing with other things in your life going on, I know that that's not always easy, but if there's an opportunity for you to find a way to exercise or go for a regular walk, that type of thing, you will find an incredible benefit from it. They found that just the process of walking and moving your body can be so powerful in assisting you to resolve problems and to be creative in your thinking. The research shows that when you're sitting down, you are not nearly as creative as when you are moving. That's why I really love a walking meeting. You know, fit it into your day. If you haven't got time to walk when you get home from work, then see if you can go for a walking meeting during the day. You'll find that you're more creative. You don't have the eye-to-eye contact, so it tends to be that there's less sort of issues around raising things that might otherwise be a bit out there. Go for walking meetings. They're really, really good. So we've got sleep, eating well, exercise, doing things that bring you joy, and that could be reading a book, it could be listening to your favorite music, it could be doing whatever it is, but making yourself a priority for a short period of time every day, so that you get your needs met. I can't tell you what that is for you, but if there's something special that you like to do, make sure there's room for that in your day or your week, so that those things can happen, so that your needs are met, because you are important. In fact, you are the most important person in the team, because everybody's looking to you, but you can never sort of share that you're the most important person in the team, because otherwise everyone thinks it's all about you. And it's not all about you. It's actually all about them. But when it comes to self-care, it is all about you, and you have to do what you need to do to look after you. And then finally, one of the most valuable things you can do, and this works really well when you're looking after a team, is to be generous. And being generous doesn't mean rescuing people or doing somebody else's work for them when they have the capacity or should be doing that work themselves. Being generous is seeing that person and using their name and seeing something lovely about them and telling them. It's about listening to somebody when they're going through a difficult time and holding some space for them. It's about empathy. It's about noticing other people, being generous. If somebody does something really well, and they might have done it really well 100 times, it doesn't matter, but to recognize, gee, that person's skilled at doing that, and to tell them to their face, pick up the phone or go and have a chat with them, take them out for coffee, celebrate them. That warms your heart and it warms theirs. So when we are generous, it's a win-win. The person that we're generous with gets something, and we get something too, because it's very much from here. So those are some things that you can do. Now, obviously, there's a whole lot of other stuff that as a leader, you need to start thinking about, which is how do we as a team reduce stress levels? What level of training and development do my team need so that I can trust them to do the work that they need to do? All of those different things. But just as a starter, start thinking about how you can better look after yourself, because the flow and effect to your team will be significant. Your self-care will assist them to look after themselves better. The team will perform better because we have a nurturing, caring environment where well-being is at the forefront and not a secondary thing that we think about after we've done all the work. And that's it.